bachelor's at A&M, his master's at Colorado State, got his PhD at Texas A&M. When I first met David, and I didn't meet him the whole first semester I was at Stephen F. Austin, even though I was kind of stuck into the horticulture before I got to the botany. So I'd been at SFA a whole year before I'd even taken my first class from the gentleman. But when I met David, he was a mostly fruits and veggies pomologist. He had a peach named after him that he had selected as that was your PhD, right? Yeah. But he had, as an undergraduate, had gone on a field trip to Lowry Nursery and had actually met Lynn Lowry and started realizing there was probably more in teaching ornamentals and landscaping. There was a real niche, and it couldn't just be, and he had already had this native influence. And he had a collection of, was it 50 plants on the side of the ag building, little straight rows like corn. 50 plants were donated by co-student or one of your former students?
Greenleaf Nursery.
Greenleaf Nursery. And decided, well, you got to practice what you preach. And I was in the very first class. It would evolve to be called plant materials. We called it Arboretum class, and I think that's really what it said in the catalog. And that's how the SFA Arboretum was born. Now it's 14 acres and one of the best collections, not just of natives in the state of Texas and in the South. With no further ado, past president, 1992, state president of the Native Plant Society of Texas, Dr. David Lee Creech. See, I do know who you are.
Boy, Peter was nice to me. It's so good to be here. And actually, I can't tell you how many friends we have here. And Peter's interpretation of my early career is interesting, but it's accurate in many ways. Let's see if we can get the technology. You know, I go back to slides, and if we had a snafu, we just passed them around and held them up to the light. This is Lessons Learned. I've been at SFA since 1978. I am a Texas Aggie. Okay, Peter, was this a trick? Did you turn it off or? Does that work? Yeah, that works. Okay, this is how you spell Nacogdoches. And that's my email up there. And I give a lot of talks around the country, and nobody knows where Nacogdoches is, but I have to explain it to them. And we are in the piney woods, and this is SFA Gardens today. We have about 128 acres that's under our domain. And some of you've made it over to the Piney Woods Native Plant Center, which is really a wonderful resource for the future. But we also have Jimmy Hines Park, a gift by Barbara Finney, a Lenana Creek corridor, which is probably the best collection of Taxodium genetics in the United States. Mast Arboretum, where we started, where I met Peter and so many others that have been involved in the native plant movement. We have the Ruby Mise. So when you see a name, folks, you do need to appreciate that that's an endowed name. So in the early days, the Ruby Mise and the Mast Arboretum, that's patent ad litem mast, those are in perpetuity. That's the trend line of ancient days. Now, when you put a name, it's generally 25 years, which gives the university a great opportunity to come back in 25 years and say, hey, you know, we need to keep your name. We love you to death, but we need X amount. That's true across the board in academic settings. And then finally, we have SFA Recreational Trails and Gardens, which is associated with the Gala Mines. So it's amazing that we've ended up with 128 acres, and we've got this Zone 8B location in the Piney Woods, if you don't know where you're at. And this is our staff a few months ago, and there's been some changes. Actually, in the last 3 years, staff have been rolling in and out in a pretty fast fashion just because of a lot of different factors that has affected us. Here's that first class that Peter was referring to in the spring of 1986. I was young, I was buff, I was naive, I was into fruit and vegetables. I had no students interested in fruit and vegetables, none, zero. And we had a pretty good class, and everybody was interested in ornamental. So we combined, we did this design ourselves, and it ended up in a brawl. And so we compromised and had some box beds, and we thought 36 petunias was a good idea, 36 varieties. And I've changed tone over the many years that I've been at SFA, and I owe a lot of that to my students, not just to moving in certain directions. And so I'm really blessed to have had Peter Luce, Don Stover, Jason Singhurst as grad students, who all went on and have made a name for themselves in the native plant movement and celebrating our native botany. And that's why we're here today. Look at these students. There's not a speck of dirt on them. They're beautiful. They're way to go. They're out there. They're making it happen. And the second from the left is Jordan Cunningham, and she loved it so much here, she decided to stay, and she's on staff. The garden has grown to many, many volunteers, primarily interested in our plant sale, which we do once in the spring and once in the fall. But I want to talk a little bit about climate. Peter did such a beautiful job covering a lot of the plants that we could cover here, but I've kind of changed the tone, a little bit of a broader overview. When you're 75, folks, you recognize that times have changed, and the last 3 years have been epic. So I've studied this. I've worked with NOAA in Maine. I know a little bit about the ECA, European Climate Agency, the China Climate Agency. Basically, there's a recognition that things are changing and changing faster than many of you might appreciate, that we might appreciate. So -4 was the all-time record. Some debate about 1896. February 16, 2021, ice and snow. Third record heat summer 2022. That's us in Nacogdoches. On November 23rd, 2022, we went to 9. We had everything in foliage. So to go from warm to 9 degrees Fahrenheit, the first freeze really of that season, that was really as devastating as the February 2021. Just to top off that winter, just a few months ago, we had 27F after a warm February and early March. And boy, that did some damage, lost much of the fruit crop in East Texas. We had a record flood, just to cheer us up, on May the 11th, and it went over Star Avenue. You couldn't see a fig in the patch, and they're 6 to 8 feet tall. Everything went underwater. You might have suspected we have this garden because it can't be built on by the university. There is some truth to that. If it's in a floodplain, it's not a wise spot to put a baseball field or to put a building of some sort. So a lot of that Lenana Creek floodplain has ended up in the garden domain. And then this summer, don't have to tell you about it, 112 degrees Fahrenheit at College Station, Texas, all-time record. 10 days later, they hit it again, and 7 days later, they hit it again. So think about that in terms of the hundreds of years or 100 years that we've been recording climate. This is my home. This is February 16. I still had electricity before it went out. There was 6 to 8 inches of snow on the patch and a lot of ice. I was trapped for 4 to 5 days before I could get out to the road. And then the road was, we can't drive in East Texas if there's a sliver of ice anywhere. And basically I was trapped, but I did have wood heat, and I did have a dog to keep me company. This is Bear. Bear caught a rabbit. I wanted it. I was hungry, but anyway, I couldn't deal with it. So we had 150 porta potties pulled in front of the dorms here for the young ladies too. We blew pipes all over campus, blew pipes in the ground. We are not used to this. This is not upstate New York. We fall completely apart. Yet we want to drive gently into a ditch somewhere is what we do. This is at the airport in IAH, and one of the mantras that we have airport. This is Indian hawthorn. I have watched Indian hawthorn in '83, '89, and in 2010, and in this they go to the ground. In this case, they go to the ground and below. This is a dead patch. There might be a sliver or a leaf here and there, but it's gone. Why does the nursery industry keep going back to non-sustainable landscape plant materials? I believe in an 80-20 rule. Well, I actually know why, and you do too. It's money, and they're beautiful, and they are okay for many years. And then guess what? You need to buy them again. So that's one of the rules that we always have tried to express to our students is let's look at an 80-20 or a 90-10 rule. 80-20 natives or otherwise, other plants that are bulletproof, you know they're going to survive, and then play with that 10 to 20%. But that's kind of reversed. If you look at our urban landscapes, we're packed with native exotics that have some troubles going through the kind of climate stresses that we have. This is the flood. That's our trialing garden. Wood ducks found it useful. And basically, this is the kind of test we have at SFA Gardens. So I used to get upset. Students have cried. I don't cry anymore. I basically just say, wow, man, this is going to be interesting. What comes out of this one alive? And when we first planted the azalea garden, we had about 600 of them leave Ruby Mize, and they went downstream down Lanana and ended up scattered everywhere, all the way, I guess, to Lufkin or the Angelina. And we actually had people bring them to us. I'd take that plant, I'd put it back in the ground. I said, now stay there, darn it. We don't get tornadoes. This is over at Crockett, but that's an SFA van. And that was a terrible, terrible incident at Indian Mound. And when I look at that, I say, uh-oh, no merit raises this year. We've lost a van. There's a couple of students that are upset. Oh, and also we have real trees here. And so this is a really big problem. All our crew does is just, I call it debris removal. So this February 16, we lost so many trees, branches, ice, load. And the university, we got a FEMA. We had 2 contract teams on campus, and basically they were cleaning up the campus, and they could knock the tree down piece by piece. We had no money left over for debris removal. And when you're looking at a 4-foot thick oak and a bobcat and a bunch of young boys, we're still doing it. We're still removing some of the debris from that and other incidents that are out there. So a lot of trees, particularly the old patriarchs, have taken these climate stresses, a lot of old post oaks in particular, and it has a lot to do with us. I call it Yuzuri Ha. The old are falling away, and we're kind of waiting on getting confidence in the young to take over. And so we resist it to the very last moment, and then we fall over. And that's what's happened here. This is a recent monitor just a few days ago. As most of you know, we went to red, extreme drought, exceptional drought. But look at our friends still today in Louisiana. I was just in Covington giving a talk. I couldn't believe it. There's a lot of things falling out of the landscape, including natives, because of the extremity of that drought. That's an area that gets 50 to 60 inches a year, but they haven't had any rain. Why God is punishing South Louisiana, I do not know, but it is part of it. So this is at the Native Plant Center. This is our perched upland marsh, and it's underlain by Weeches Rock. We talked about that yesterday, and this is just a month or so ago. And when you turn a wetland into a brownscape, not a sign of grass or not a sign of green, now it's back. And we always are putting up these signs, help grow the SFA gardens, because we have our own kind of drought in terms of our economic prosperity, and we're working on that. I have explained to the administration many times that COVID, climate, economics, my campus is not the same as it was before March of 2020. And we've gone from 13,000 students to 10,000 students, and we're on our way back. And we made it to our 100th anniversary. And when I make these requests, hey, we need a break here, it's always a decision in one of these rooms. This is the Board of Regents, and the decision is often made somewhat, well, there we are. I am now a Texas Longhorn. I am a lumberjack, but we have kept our name SFA. How long that lasts, I don't know, but I do know that I am being taped. And I also know that I am being recorded, and I also know I am a Texas Aggie. And this is hard. I had some real stress on this. And I just need a little time to get over it. But I have decided, particularly since I'm being taped, that hook 'em horns. I'm excited about it. Let's go for it. This fits all of us in this room, doesn't it? I mean, my whole life, and yours too, in a lot of ways, is I dreamed of this trajectory to the top at SFA Gardens. And it's been a very fun and convoluted path to get to where we are today. And where we are tomorrow is going to be a surprise. So I have a cheerful outlook on it. I love our new University of Texas system. Where is the recorder on this? And we are looking forward to a future where SFA Gardens makes an impact on the native plant society, native plant movement, as well as adventuresome horticulture. That's our goal, and we're going to continue. I have interesting roots. I was born in America, but I lived in Asia until I was 16 years old. And my dad was in foreign agriculture work. So I'm from India, East Pakistan, and Burma, now Bangladesh and Myanmar. And then I came back to America as a senior in high school, and I had on a bow tie. I had on seersucker shorts. I had Nina shocks. My mother let me dress. I went into A&M Consolidated. The next thing I knew, Sammy Kettner had me on the ground between his legs, taking the life out of me because I did not have on blue jeans, a t-shirt, and kids. I've changed. I've lost my accent, and I am Shelby County, just like Greg Grant and just like Andrew King, who was working for us now. So out of Shelby County, there's been a lot of interesting horticulture, and I'm glad to be part of it. My roots are fruit and pecans. This is J.B. Story at Texas A&M. This is Hollis Bowen, Rutgers, New Jersey fame under so many wonderful teachers I've had at Texas A&M. I did my master's at Colorado. But I met this fella early in my career, way early when I was an undergraduate, because we were doing blueberries at Texas A&M. And in the 60s, I went to Lowry Nursery and met him. And I connected with him again in the 80s when we were getting into the garden business. And I was managed to make a trek with Lynn to Mexico 5 or 6 times and lots of East Texas botany. Lynn never had a calendar. His idea of working was just say, hey, I think I'll go to Mexico tomorrow. Do you want to join me? And I would usually say yes if I could. And I'd scrap around to get to go because he was a treasure for all of us out of Louisiana, but he never really gave a talk. He didn't write a lot, but he was just such a wonderful gentleman. And he woke up in the morning wanting to share. So when he was at Lowry Nursery down in Houston, he'd say, look, Mike's not going to be here tomorrow. He was kind of piddling around there at the nursery. And why don't you come by tomorrow and I'll give you a bunch of plants. And that's not the way to make money in the nursery business. It's just to hand out plant. He would give you the last plant. He had that kind of sharing attitude. He also is part of John Ferry and Carl Schoenfeld in the early days of the Yuckadoo and Nursery and the John Ferry Garden now. The name Peckerwood was discarded, of course, for obvious reasons. You know, it's we're changing the name of our conference. We have an annual Wild About Woodies conference, and we went 7 years before I realized that was offensive. You cannot use the word on the list. One of them is rule of thumb. Did y'all know that? Rule of thumb is a bad word. Why is it? It's an old world term to mean that you can't use a switch bigger than your thumb to beat your wife. That's the truth. I have never used a stick that big. Anyway, this is Lynn Lowry, Benny Simpson, and Barton Warnock. And I had the privilege to know all 3 of them. It's a great photograph. They were friends. They would argue. They'd have a fight. And then they'd all make up and go back to botanizing. And Benny wouldn't go to Mexico. He was offended by the whole idea. But Lynn kind of wandered around all across the Gulf South. And we all know what Barton did in terms of making a contribution to why we're here today. I have other people that influenced me. These have all passed. But this is Sherwood Aiken in Sibley, Louisiana. He could root a fence post. I was not used to that kind of abrupt lifestyle, et cetera. And we gave him, he got a master's degree under L. Ray Nixon and we had a wonderful time, and we've been fast friends ever since. And he's nearby and drops in and has an opinion if you ask him. And so we're pleased, but I did want you to show you that that's Peter on the right. I think he was 8 or 9 years old then, smoking a cigarette, and this goes way back. And this is actually Herbert K. Durand, and that's Eric Leisenhauser. And we did have a mullet day, by the way. Some of us. Charles Allen, there's Peter on the right, Lance Craig, and I. And what a wonderful life I have enjoyed. Peter introduced so many plants, and this wonderful Peter's Purple is what we call it. It's Monarda. It's great. Look at that. I mean, another happy camp. These are our students at SFA. Don Stover, who came here in the 1930s. No, it was 1999, 97. What a great graduate student. And she liked it so much, she stayed as our research associate and was here for 20 plus years. And what a band, what a cruise of students that flowed through here. And this is our award-winning team at ASHS. Ruth Williamson and Dawn, we both were blessed to know this wonderful lady. She wanted no accolades. She just wanted to come and work in the Williamson garden there. Dawn was such a joy and still is, and she had a lot of talents. And I'm so happy that so many years ago, she moved into being pollinators and prairies and native plants and put an emphasis on it that led to her current position at USDA NRCS, where she's making waves everywhere. And we so appreciate her. She's part of an IPPS auction there. That's at Tony Avent, part of his work at SFA. But I want to say, out of all of the work that she ever did, this was the one that's most notorious, because this was in Nanjing Daily News, and they have 36 million viewers. That's the truth. So when we flowered the corpse flower, I work in China, this was kind of a big deal over there. And they had me give a symposium, and the Nanjing Daily News took our pictures and put it up on the front page, seen by 36 million people. There isn't a dean, there isn't a vice president or a president of this university that can say that, if you think about it. So even though this is not a native plant and it's actually obnoxious, it smells like a dead cow after 7 days to attract the flies. This was a kind of a singular event, the first time in Texas, and we were so proud of it. And to this day, Dawn is scattering adventuresome horticulture, exciting horticulture across the East Texas piney woods. And so we're so proud of her. And there's Jordan on the right. And Jordan is her protege. Look at this. This is way back. This is Jason Singhurst in one of my classes. And we had some Saracenias and are creating a bog. And now he went off his thesis and really covered 9 endangered plants. And there's about 50 of conservation concern in East Texas. And then there's a number that are federally endangered or state endangered. Or it's an interesting thing. And our goal for so many years has been to involved in them. Finally, Andrew King is a student of 20 plus years ago. He got a PhD at A&M. He's back in the throes here at King's Nursery at Tenaha, the oldest continuously operated nursery in Texas. This young man knows what a 3-point hitch is. He knows the nursery business, and he loves plants. So what a joy it is to bring Andrew King back into the fold at Stephen F. Austin. I feel so blessed to have him on board. Now, this is a little history I put in on a case study of divine intervention. In this garden, this Piney Woods Native Plant Center, we already had an arboretum, we already had an azalea garden, but we managed to get 40 plus acres. We, meaning you and I and the state of Texas and our citizens, have a beautiful green space with a beautiful home. Now, this is 1939. That's before they channelized Lenana Creek to give the floods to Lufkin and the Angelina River. You know, that used to be a part of the Army Corps of Engineers. And the Tucker property was forest then. Never logged that we know of. We don't have any records of that. And it's 40 acres. And then in 1995, I think this is, you can see across the top, Lenana has been channelized. The PNPC is still there. It's basically still a forest. It's got a little more openness on it. And then SFA is growing across the landscape. And here's the Native Plant Center today with its forest that has maintained itself. And we took a wonderful tour to see the shagbarks and the huge pines. And we do not run lumber out of this place. If something falls, we get it off the trail and we let nature take care of it. So what a blessing to go from here. And we've used this as our office, the Tucker House, remodeled by Dr. James C. Kroll, Whitetail Deer Institute, Forest Resources Institute. He's retired. And so that's where our staff and the Conservation Fund with Julie Shackelford. And hey, it's not a bad gig to look out a window and to see this. And that's part of our joy of the Native Plant Center. We dedicated this place in 1999 and we called it the Piney Woods Native Plant Center. I give Kroll a lot of credit for it. And the university actually thought it was the house in a center. A center can be one office, one person in the academic environment, but we had a plan. We wanted the whole 40 acres. And so we had a dedication in 1999. Ellen Temple had a lot to do with getting us a higher profile. There's Julie Shackelford in her early days. Ms. Abernathy, and we got Ladybird to come to SFA. I knew Bob. Thank you so much. Oh, I knew Bob Brunick on the right. There's Ladybird. There's Secret Service Mike, Secret Service Julie. There are anti-Ladybird terrorists out there. I didn't know this. And then I'm showing her a Gaillardia, I believe. And she was such a delightful woman. We had a banquet here. $300, $500 a plate, all for the Native Plant Center. And she waved a wand and said, this Native Plant Center, Piney Woods Native Plant Center, and all 40 acres. And she wrote the letter. And so we are fixed in at least her letter for the future. We do need a name. It's very important at universities that this be the Greg Grant Native Plant Center or whatever, Will Fleming Native Plant, but we need some money with that. So after this lecture, we'll pass the hat and raise $4 million to get the perpetuity that we need. So what a joy it was, but I had a problem. I had a forest, pure forest, all shade. I mean, 100%. This is a native plant shade garden. And I asked the administration, oh, look, we'd like to clear out about 8 acres, kind of open it up a little bit to grow things. And they said, no, Dave, you took down too much at the Ruby Mize and nobody authorized. And so I pouted around until April. And then God said something. God stepped in and said, let there be light. And he gave us a tornado. I'm serious. Dr. McCullough had a boat barn. It was ugly, had a whole bunch of boats, ugly fence. I said, Jack, move that boat barn out of here. And he said, no, I've been here 8 or 10 years. I'm not moving it. God said, let's get rid of that boat barn. That pine tree went through the barn, went through all of his boats, made the twin hull a 4-hull. All the John boats smashed, and they're gone. So don't mess with Ladybird, don't mess with God, because he wants a native plant center. So when we cleaned up, we had disaster money. It skipped right over Regay Elementary. They were in session. I couldn't believe it. Didn't touch the Tucker House, just plowed through the Piney Woods Native Plant Center, jumped down into the bottom, went across Lanana, went up on the hill, headed east. So this is what happened after we cleaned up, started cleaning up. We had FEMA money, and I'd say, well, that tree has a bad branch. It needs to go too, you know? So we got our prairie, we got our sunlight on about 8 of the 40 acres. So we managed to get some outside grants. We got a start of a head house, our first barn. My students and I built this. Matt Welch was in charge, and we built this beautiful little Quonset hut. We had some donations. This is George and Faye Young Foundation. We found a way to get some signage going on the property, and we built a boardwalk with a grant. And we essentially have had a wonderful experience here. This is my wife, Janet. So we have boardwalks down in the bottom. Not all of them last 20 years. We got a TP&W Trails grant by Elise Rodewald, who was with us. 2.5 miles of asphalt trails is a big deal. If you did it today, it'd really be costly. I think we were paying $6 a yard or something back then. It was cheap. And we had a TPNW, Texas Forest Service grant to help us remove the dominant species, privet. And it's a 3-year program. And those of you who walked on that tour know we've done a pretty good job. We still have a few privets and pretty tough to get rid of, but it's a 3-year program. Brush acts, hit the new growth with some herbicides, and then spot treat after that. And that's how so many ephemerals came back. Things that we didn't think would be there are still there. We added in the Cullowhee Lone Star Regional Native Plant Conference. If you hadn't been to Cullowhee, you need to go. So we had, the first one was Return of the Natives, and that got me in trouble too. But I don't know why. And then we had I Likes You a Lot and I Likes You Very Much and Very Much. And these covers have turned us in ScholarWorks into one of the #1 downloads. It's not the content, great proceedings. You ought to look them up. Just type in Cullowhee Lone Star Regional. Had 18 speakers, had bus trips. Peter was in charge. You know it was fun. It was basically, oh, this one almost got me fired. This is Sex in the Garden, and it was referring to one of the main threats against Hibiscus daisicalix, which is the intrusion of other species of hibiscus. We've done a lot of work with Hibiscus daisicalix. My daughter invented the name Age of Aquarius. I take credit for it. I thought that was good. The Age of Aquarius, the Age of Aquarius. And we have others that I am timid to show. So anyway, we created a green roof, the first green roof that has ever been designed so you could actually set it on fire. Think about that. And we had this flashing around it, and we had a fire. We did do a fire. We didn't alert all the right people, and somebody saw it from the road, and a fire truck showed up, and police, and I was in trouble because they normally charge you $1,000 on a false alarm. I don't know. It was a mess. So we have been timid to burn the roof again. So boardwalks break apart. We got a wonderful grant from the George and Faye, from the Bright Foundation, excuse me, and that made a huge difference because we had to close it. And we were out of money, and at the last moment, the Bright Foundation, we have a Trex. We still have 1 or 2 boardwalks that we have to get to. It's the lifespan is about 20 years, and basically, if somebody falls through, it's a serious issue at SFA, and even a hole in the 7 miles of asphalt is a problem. So we do a lot of that. #1 or 2 problem, it's either administration or critters. And this pig thing, which many of you saw at SFA, is really a tough chore. And we have them back, and they come in drought years, and they run Lanana. And then we have this policy that you cannot shoot a pig on campus. Yet we have 500 students with concealed carry. And I have announced to classes that if you're packing heat, you get an A. I am not here to argue with you about your grade or your girlfriend. So this is deer, squirrel, rabbits, beavers on the Lanana love ball cypress, and then the pigs are really making a mess right now. And we're actually pulled a bunch of plants and put them in pots, and we're going to deal with this in the future. Well, if you're successful and happy and you got fans, we have to have a building. So we came up with this idea for a campaign for the conservation education building, primarily, solely, really for children. And the young lady there that looks like a deer in headlights is Elise Rodewald, and she did not want to be there. This is presentation to the Board of Regents. This is one of those events where if you think about it, we're not asking for money. That's unusual. And I said, all we want is your blessing, and we'll go find the money. And actually, we did do that. And we've ended up with a very nice building, Ina Brundrett Conservation Education Building, 1.2 million, 280 a square foot. We had to make it green, and we got a grant from somewhere, what's the name of the company? But we ended up with solar on the house that basically I can see on the phone where about 80% of the electricity of this building is managed by solar. We had a dedication in 2004 14 or 15, and they didn't want me at the podium, and I don't blame them in a lot of ways, but I had a friend on the Board of Regents said, you need to talk, and I bragged on everybody that had ever existed in the administration. That's the Board of Regents, and it was a joyous moment because that's the president there, kind of timid, and the foundation in the background. It's very difficult to build a building on campus in terms of cost per square foot, and that was one of my painful moments, really, in a lot of ways. But here's the lady that invented environmental ed. She came to me in 2000 and said, I want to be your environmental ed coordinator. I said, no, I'm not interested. We don't have any money. Goodbye. And I was kind of rude, actually. And she came back in a year and she said, I want to be your environmental ed coordinator. I have half my salary. And I said, let's talk. And she did. And so she stayed for 20 years, and she really brought the program to a great stature. We had over 12,000 kids, 10 to 12,000 kids a year in the independent school districts. And basically, we're here to educate, entertain, and enlighten. And I changed my tone. Children are not just garden pests. Children are the future. And I realized it after watching her and her programming. And, you know, she put away the cell phones in a box, a shoebox, and she made them sit on a rock in the forest, and she connected them with the environment. And it was really a wonderful experience for everybody and the parents. We had I call it kind of lost child in the woods. This is one of the covers of our colorway as well. It's a lot of times we are distracted. I am, by what's going on around me and who's texting me and what's going on. Well, maybe we should just throw that darn cell phone away and do something else. We have a Bugs, Butterflies, Blossoms event that was just fabulous and involved so many interns in education and in forestry and in horticulture. And to go to 12,000, this is not just walk and talk. I used to have kids. I'd walk and talk these little kids around and say, now, y'all get back on the bus. I've got something to do. Now, this is really educating them. It's essential elements. It is curriculum compatible. It means the teacher doesn't have to teach that day. That curriculum, they're very, very precise, will be covered. And we're there to cure nature deficit disorder in these small groups of kids. And I think it's probably one of the most, when the dust settles on SFA gardens on PNPC, I really firmly believe that it's this effort and this impact that we should be remembered for, because if we don't get out there, environmental education for kids is critical because they are imprintable, they are ready to learn, and they are the future. And 42% of the environmental ed programs didn't come out of COVID. 42% related to gardens and institutions of higher learning. Because when COVID hit, I went to zero. I mean, we were rocking, and then we had nothing. Dawn said I was in denial. She was right. I thought this thing would be over in a month or two, but we were shut down. And as a result, Elise retired, the assistant coordinator left, and that was a real problem. We are bringing it back, and we're excited about it. Signage is part of what we do. Firescape. This is Elise. We have had fires at the marsh. We're going to bring those back in the future. I have lots of funny stories about this. We brought the children out. Basically, we burn about 2 acres, and it's over in about 2 minutes or 5 minutes, and it's a wonderful educational event. After the very first one, we learned that it's extremely critical to kind of get a crew to walk through the marsh to chase out bunnies and possums, because a bunny on fire is a very sad thing to the kids. We get the Texas Forest Service. We get that actually happened. That's called, I have this philosophy that planning is kind of irrelevant. It's unanticipated surprises that rules your life. There's our roof. Nice Hymenocallis colony that we're trying to nurture, natural in the bottom there. We are there to protect the wildflowers. Shifting gears, we have worked with Hibiscus daisy calyx on the right, Gaillardia astabilis, and we've worked with Phlox nivalis. I go back with Hibiscus daisy calyx way back into the 1980s and have been looking at this plant in a lot of different ways. We called our program the 3 R's, got to have a mantra. This is rescue, research, and reintroduction. And I think we've made an impact, certainly on the graduate students in these thesis projects. We've got the hirsute calyx. We've got this identifier, very narrow leaves that are out there. It looks like marijuana if there's no flowers. I noticed they were always clipped in the garden. College kids going home to dry it and then roll it up and smoke it, and they get dreaded hibiscus lung. It's a horrible thing. Anyway, we put in a plot outside of town. You turn something out looking at horticulture and conservation. How do they fit together? We're here to grow plants. I'm not a botanist. I'm a horticulturist. I like to grow things. So Stacy's plot was basically, what is the impact of fertilizer and mulch in an appropriate habitat on hibiscus daisy calyx? And this is intended for sustainability. Does fertilizer help at the beginning of the life of a plant to make it long-term and sustainable? Does mulch help? And so we headed out the gate, and I'll summarize it by saying, yes, fertilizer does help. If you position slow-release fertilizer here, she found greater growth, more seed capsules, more stems at the ground. We're also blessed in that we're lazy. We let 15 years pass. So we decided to go back to the site to get an annual mow. And then we decided that, oh my gosh, this thing is still rocking and rolling with no care at all. We created the Hibiscus Daisy Calyx Salvation Team. We thought that sounded good. Dr. Dave Culhavy, the elderly gentleman, my friend there, and they came in and GPS'd every point. We transected. We had the original steel posts around it. We knew where the original plants were, and we measured every plant and counted the number of stems, and we cut them off at the winter because they're going to die to the ground anyway. We weighed them, and we got a pretty good pub out of it. It was a lot of students involved in forestry, and that's the final image. There's a lot of images otherwise, but if you see the big pinks, you'll see there are 12 to 50 something stems. That's an old plant. And it shows you the flow from this lake in the spillway. The spillway is not the primary outlet. It is a overflow there in that little box that you see on the dam. And we've been watching this colony since 20 plus years. So that's nearly 30 years. That's pretty amazing in a way that effort has led to a colony. And then we scout for other hibiscus. We don't want them there, and we make sure they're not. We have found 3 pinks in the bunch. They had a hirsute calyx. Is that part of the gene pool? They were pure to type. And so we decided to move them out of there just because, I don't know, that was a decision made. We started with 96 and we ended up with 476 in the 2013, and they're still there to this day. Reintroduction studies are interesting. This is not the natural habitat, but it is an appropriate habitat. It's a wetland, stays moist, and the plants have actually found their way. We have 6 or 7 of these that have been designated critical habitat, actually. This is at Douglas, and we peppered this thing, Mark Norman did, with hundreds of hibiscus daisy calyx because it was a retention basin, and the plants find their home here. So in some areas they left, some areas they didn't, and we have sweeps of hibiscus daisy calyx. This is a species that can be protected. Its #1 threat is other hibiscus. For some reason, it just can't deal with militaris and some of the other mosquitoes that come into the territory. And because of habitat disruption, it's a problem. We also have herbivory. We have some weevils that get in there and get the seed. And we do know that pigs, I don't even mention pigs, but pigs is a terrible problem. If you say wetland, you're talking pigs in a drought. And it's really a bad situation because they destroy plants, kick them up, run off with them. It's terrible. We've also done a lot of work with Gaillardia. We love Gaillardia astavilis variety Winkleri. This is kind of a classic look of one. And from Southeast Texas, astavilis straight is yellow from Louisiana. And then this is Dawn Stover's gift to the world. I think it helped her with the Lynn Lowry Award for an introduction. This was 5 generations that this young lady did to get the purple out. Okay, we're SFA, we're purple. We thought, wow, that'll be good. We can introduce grape sensation. And it actually worked. And there's Dawn in the garden in her early years. I'm really proud for this particular introduction. It still exists. And you can find it anywhere. My buddy Alan Armitage at Georgia basically just peppered this, and he made it an Athens Select Plant of the Year. It was a big deal. And we didn't get a footnote. I want some money. But anyway, it's part of spreading the wealth of our genetic resources across the Gulf South. This one's a little tricky. This is not going to be at Home Depot, Walmart, or Lowe's, but we can make it into a beautiful colony. And so we work with Southeast Texas and have had a number of projects associated with Phlox nivalis subspecies texensis, the Texas trailing phlox. Pigs and fire. It needs fire. It doesn't need pigs. We learned a lot on introduction. You don't go to the ground juicy, fertilized, beautiful 1-gallon cans. I put 1,200 of them. The next morning they were gone. Deer smelled the fertilizer in the plant, smelled the nutrition, and they were off. So if you do reintroduction work, you need to go to the ground, need to go to establishment sites, go scrappy. A lot of sand, less fertility, plant that is, they don't look like this in the wild. They're a little bit rougher looking. So that kind of makes them less attractive to our herbivores, but a beautiful plant and one that we need to keep going, and we will keep it going. Deer and hogs, fertilizer plants going into wild where deer candy and fire is a critical part of the program. Yucca sinua, think how wonderful it is to be in an ecology where we're still finding plants. This is 2004, Eric Keith. This is Yucca sinua. We don't make seed. Nobody makes seed, but Tony Avent makes seed. I was just up there in North Carolina. I said, what? You're making seed? And I don't know how he's doing it because there's a special moth, and I would love to have a grad student get the moth and find out how we can get it established because we do not make seed. Stewartia malacodendron from the 1980s. I knew Osa Hall. He used to take people to the site blindfolded, drive around the woods, take circles, and there you'd be. Lovely plant. We do have one alive. This is not an easy plant. This is a plant kind of like a sheep. It's born looking for a place to die. It's a problem. Frank, this is not a Texas native, but it does show you kind of our intent. This is one of the rare signature plants and endangered. It's Franklinia latimer. We have flowered it a number of years. I planted 100. I planted at least 100, and all of them have died but one. And we have one in the Gala Myas that just doesn't want to die, and it wants to keep flowering. So we're really excited to have this plant that's extinct in the wild, was saved in Pennsylvania and then scattered out. What a terrible gene pool if you think about it. Is there diversity there through the seedlings? It's got to be restricted, so it's a tough plant. Of course, we don't like to talk about native vars. Some people don't, and this shows you what people can do in the breeding world. Both of these are natives, Gordonia lacyanthus and Franklinia latimer, the plant we just described. And Tom Rainey has put them together, and we end up with X. gordulinia. And there's some others that he's worked with. So these are hybrids, man-created. Daniel Boone is dead. It's all resource management now philosophy. This kind of terrifies a lot of the native plant people because we're messing around with genetics. But so are animals. They're moving them in their hair 30 miles south. There's a lot of things going on in the environment. The environment has changed. It's a different climate, and we have issues to maintain. I love ball cypress because it's permanent. 2,500 years, 3,000 years from now, we'll come to Lanana Creek. It's going to be outrageous. There's a hill country in the Frio River. There's the Senator, which is burned to the ground by Sarah Barnes in 2012. We have that tree. A horticulturist, a nurseryman down the road, she was smoking meth. She caught the giant, the largest national champ, on fire. I have eulogized her in my WordPress. My wife has made me take her picture down because that was cruel and this and that, but I was upset, and she was cooking meth and she caught the tree on fire, and she took photographs of it with a cell phone, which is like saying, I am about to go to jail. I'm taking a picture. Anyway, she sent it to her friends, and she got 6 months, and I followed her career. She was a wannabe model. This is Montezuma cypress from Oaxaca, and down in the lower right is Janet, and she's that's our honeymoon in 2001, and she came back and she said, you took 100 pictures of that tree, but only 2 of me. And I said, well, I really wanted to have my honeymoon there because I wanted to see this tree. And it is huge. It's 210 feet in circumference. And for those of you that want to get in the weeds, they are considered by some camps to be 3 species. all 3 subspecies, actually 3 botanical varieties. So they're all disticum variety. There's other people that argue against that. Again, I'm not a botanist, but Arnold at A&M's my bud, and that's his conclusion. And you can see ball cypress, pond cypress, and Montezuma cypress, which is a Texas native. It's south of Texas, South Texas. And if you go to Tree Search, you can probably still see this. This is bald Montezuma and pond, and that's how they grow. Montezuma wants to be evergreen. It's south, and it wants to keep its foliage. But guess what? We didn't know it when Lynn Lowry gave me the very first one in the early 80s. I assumed it would die. He wasn't sure either because we're going to get cold. -4 didn't touch this tree. So this is a plant. This is a species that's 65 million years old. This is a species with a genome 4 times bigger than a human. This is a species that has a lot of genetic memory. It goes all over the world at one time during the age of the conifers. Go back to Taxodium dubium 120 million years ago. So it was in China, it was everywhere. And so this is an interesting, tough plant. And look what we can do as horticulturists. This is Jim's little guy. It's a dwarf, a foot a year. Found in New Zealand, Cascade Falls over at the Ruby Mise, and it's a weeper. If you plant it, it'll grow on the ground like a snake. You have to put it up, and you can make this love tunnel. Kids get married here. It's a wedding site. People are excited about it. Kids practice being married here. It's a wonderful, wonderful addition to the garden. This is China. I've been working in China. Isn't it interesting, folks, that the Chinese have taken our species, our Native American plant. They're into F2s and F3s and salt tolerant and pH tolerance, and they're growing and planting it in the millions. This is my bud from the 1990s. And I just can't tell you what a wonderful friend he has been. Guangxi is the term, time, trust, friendship, and experience. And when you form a friendship with people, this is not the government. This is down at the human level. He's been really, really a great part of my life. When you see 3 million seedlings, 3 million seedlings in a patch, is that an opportunity for selection or not? If the pH is 7.8 or 8.3, everything turns yellow except that one and that one and that one. And those are the ones that you can grab. It's called plant improvement. And that was the one that we named Lanana on the creek. Beautiful tree. It's actually being offered in the trade, but we have lots of genotypes. This is liquid amber found by Don Shadow in Tennessee. And that's the original tree right there on the right. A sweet gum that is 60 feet tall and maybe 6-8 feet wide. And he got some wood and he went back to get some more wood. He'd already grafted it, and the landowner found him and had a gun. This is Tennessee. And basically he left the place, but he already had the wood. He went back and that tree was cut down. We don't want people on our property. This is called property rights. It's we've surrounded a labyrinth where we do great meditation time. Deciduous hollies. Peter has covered a lot of this. This is my favorite. This is Paco Scott Reeves out of Tree Search Farms. Nobody has this. If you want it, we'll give it to you. This is Lowry's big leaf. And it is a big leaf, by the way. It's that's its attribute. People say, what else does it do? And I say, what else does it need to do? It's got a big leaf. Scarlet Peak and Will Fleming upright. We like Scarlet Peak because it's got berries on it, and it's Dan Batson's introduction from years ago. Lynn Lowry gave us our first starts of the Fulshear, Louisiana, Angola prison, hydrangea quercifolia, and that's the genetics that you see at SFA Gardens now. And it's lots of diversity. We've got some big heads on there. We've got some we hope are pink, but here's the exciting thing. Is it a native or not? I went up to Dangerfield and there's reports, and I don't think those are actually natives, but it is on the other side of the river. And so we think that this is a beautiful site for a beautiful plant. And 6 inches to a foot above the ground, hydrangea quercifolia has found a home there. It's actually growing between bricks and the concrete. What's the cure? What's the clue? Drainage, 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 and some moisture the first year or so. And after that, it's tough as nails. Peter mentioned American Beautyberry. Look at that. That's Jordan. She always, no matter when I take a picture of her, it matches her plant, her fruit, her flower. I couldn't believe it. Yeah, it happens all the time. And so the pink beautyberry was found by Matt Welch and Davy Crockett Natural Forest. I ran into it just recently in North Carolina. There's Welch's pink. They don't mention our name. There's a lot of pinks out there now. We have seedlings. We're doing this and that. But it was the very first pink that was introduced to trade. And I'll never forget it because Matt was doing hibiscus work in the Davy Crockett. He stopped at Alto to get a lunch. He was eating a chicken fried steak and some fries. And on the TV, the towers were falling. 9/11. So when people say 9/11, I always say, oh, that's when we found that pink beautyberry. So think about that. That was prescient. Alyssium floridanum across the river in Louisiana, lovely plant, fully evergreen, came through the snow and ice in the last 3 years in fine shape. Sweet Spire, love affair with Sweet Spire for so many years. Trying to show you what breeders have done. This is Denny Werner and some others. And we have all of these color forms, and a lot of them are not adapted because they're northern. Some of them are, and you have to kind of sort through there. But here's one that's been with us 4 years, and it's called Flamethrower. And I promise you, Denny is carrying he's driving a Raptor with a sunroof. This thing is hot. Don't need flyers. This thing is really, really noisy. We love Buckeyes. I like big, so we have this one from Rob McElwee in Louisiana. We want an Aeschylus Wang-Eye size, which is 2 pounds, and you don't put a bench under that because it can kill you when it drops, but it's a nice idea to look for those genotypes that have some superior characteristic if you're a horticulturist. 3 minutes. Okay, we're in good shape. This is my friend, Shelby County. This is Malva viscus, and he's introduced the pink and so many that are part of our program. Greg introduced Bignonia capreolata, Helen Friedel. We have introduced Lynn Lowry's first original Dam B and subsequent seedlings of that. Dam B was the first big inflorescence on our native Wisteria frutescens. Peter introduced one that's called Peter's Pink, and it's kind of pink. Pink is there, and it certainly needs to be a little brighter. Our goal is a lot of native azaleas, and we're working on that. We're exploring a little bit into this world. There's a lot of cultivars out there. This is a Strinum from Alabama, and it does real well here. Not a single one of these have suffered through the last few years. Physostegia corli is here. Trout lily is here. Pussy toes are here. Bloodroot is here. And this is the same plant 20-something years ago. This is Janet recently, or a few years ago, that when I first met her in Shreveport, Louisiana, and I stepped out of my truck and I said, oh, I'm in trouble. This young lady likes plants, Spigelia marylandica, and she had trout lilies as well. Finally, I'm still a fruit guy. Okay, I'm not going to give up on that. And we have a fruit program at SFA, and the 2 natives that are involved. See, I had a mullet era too. So basically, this goes back to the 1970s and the introduction of blueberries, which are a southern Gulf South native. We have a lot of vacciniums here. My wife is a vegan. She thought that I walked on water back then. That was great. We have a lot of blueberries. We've introduced some blueberries. Muscadine grapes, is it going to be a commercial commodity? Maybe. We have 2 that are seedless, and we are putting together the collection with Dr. Justin Shiner and our friends at Texas A&M and Mississippi State and Florida, et cetera. And so there's wonderful varieties that we should have in the trade and should emphasize. Our rule is no spray program, none, zero, Zipola. And we have to make money, so we opened it up. They parked at Kroger's. We made quite a bit of money in a very brief period of time. So I'm thinking, maybe we expand. Conclusions. Natural and urban landscapes are being tested as never before. And I'm 75. I can promise you this is really different the last 3 years. It's one climate challenge after another. Peter Raven said this at a meeting. Are we clinging to habitats and ecosystems in a climate that no longer exists? I'm for genetic provenance, known locations, having everything, but maybe we ought to look a little south and a little west, a little more heat tolerant. But we got to keep the cold because this incredible cold spells that come from the north, the climate is just more energetic. We have a program we need tree and shrub research centers over the Texas, where we actually go out there and do evaluations. This is at Galveston Island, Moody Gardens. Celebrating neighbors is the solution. It's not the problem. And we should continue that into the future. Thank you so much.
Any questions?